Hello, Bobby Torres of Frightbox recording here to talk about some of the problems with online mixing tutorials. Now, don't get me wrong, mixing is extremely important and I have a channel packed full of mixing tutorials. But after running this channel for a few years and talking to some of my viewers and hearing the same questions over and over and over again, I've realized that sometimes, and actually more often than not, people are focusing on the wrong things. And many times, online mixing tutorials are the culprit. The first problem that I have found with online mixing tutorials is that they push a preset mindset. Now, presets are great. I use them all of the time. But here's the thing. When you have experience and you've been doing this for decades, you understand how presets work. They're just starting points. And sometimes they're not the answer at all. What I found is when beginners or intermediate mixers watch an online tutorial, for example, maybe how to mix a snare drum or how to EQ a guitar track or how to mix vocals, they will apply exactly what they learn to their mix without thinking objectively about their mix itself. So for example, let's say you watch a tutorial on how to mix a snare drum from your favorite mixer. Maybe they're mixing a live snare drum and you're mixing a programmed snare drum that's already pre-processed. What you've learned from that tutorial might not work with your snare drum, again, because it's already pre-EQ'd and pre-compressed. Way different than mixing a raw live snare drum. Or maybe your favorite mixer in a tutorial is mixing a guitar track that was recorded properly at the source, and your guitar track has all types of phase issues. The playing might not be that tight. Maybe you're using a crappy sounding IR. Again, the techniques that they're sharing might not apply to your guitar tracks. And of course, if you're watching a pro mixer, maybe that's mixing a track in Nashville or something, mixing a clean vocalist, and you try to apply that to a screaming vocal track, it might not work. Often, it won't work. Screaming vocals and clean vocals are very different types of vocal tracks. Now, the second huge issue with online mixing tutorials is that they are so plugin focused. Whether this is by design or by default, I found this to hold a lot of people back, especially beginners. So even on my own channel, I will get people asking questions about the specific compressor I'm using, saturator I'm using, even reverb that I'm using. When in reality, none of that stuff matters. It's how you use the plugins that you have, even if they are stock plugins. Now, yes, this can be said for any piece of audio equipment, even microphones or preamps. But here's the thing, microphones and preamps are generally way more expensive than plugins. And because plugins are so cheap by comparison, it's easy to get carried away and endlessly try different plugins and buy different plugins and to try and acquire the exact same plugins that our favorite mixers are using. And I can say with 100% certainty, this is not the way to go. You are much better off learning how to use the stock plugins in your DAW than going out there and dropping money on the same plugins that you see your favorite mixer using. And again, online mixing tutorials is a breeding ground for this issue. Okay, and the biggest issue of all that I have found when it comes to online mixing tutorials is that they take the focus away from the most important thing of all in audio production, and that is the source. And when I say the source, I mean a few different things. The source tracks, the arrangement, and ultimately the actual song that you're working on. Now, I get emails all of the time of people asking me to make a specific mixing tutorial on a specific topic that they're having issues with. And in a lot of these emails, people will attach their mix for me to check out to demonstrate the issue that they're having. And I gotta say, 8 to 9 times out of 10, they don't have a mixing issue. They have an actual recording, songwriting, and production issue. Yes, they can also work on their mixing chops, but for example, people will say, you know, my guitar tone is muddy, but when I listen to the song, the guitar is out of tune, not in time, and guitars that are out of tune and not in time will come across as sounding muddy, even if the tone is the best tone in the world. People will often tell me that they cannot hear the individual elements of their mix, that things are stepping all over each other, but when I listen to their song, the arrangement is jacked up. There are way too many layers, there are harmonies happening that don't really make any sense, that are happening throughout the entire track. Again, these are not mixing problems. These are actual production problems. Now, when these topics come up for home studio owners, they often will go on YouTube looking for a mixing tutorial on that specific issue, which ultimately leads to unnecessary confusion. Now, again, I have nothing against mixing tutorials. There's a lot to be learned about mixing. I myself create endless mixing tutorials because mixing is an art form in and of itself. But the way to achieve pro sounding mixes is to understand production as a whole. And an online mixing tutorial is only a small sliver of what you need in order to produce pro level productions that compete with your favorite records. The problem is that so many home studio owners get caught in these same traps, and they end up endlessly trying different techniques and buying different plugins and different gear, hoping to produce the sounds that they hear, again, on their favorite albums, only to be endlessly frustrated. I know, I was there for over a decade of my life. Now, I don't want this for you. I want you to produce pro level results with the gear that you already have in way less time. And because of this, I put something together called my Polished Production Checklist. The Polished Production Checklist is a simple, straightforward PDF guide that simply outlines the key steps that I follow when producing a song from scratch, regardless of the gear that I'm using. It'll help you focus on the things that matter and to forget and ignore the endless noise that's just gonna distract you. The Polished Production Checklist is absolutely free right now, and you can have direct access by clicking the link below in this video's description. Now, if you struggle with your music sounding professional and you like to watch me produce a song from absolute scratch all the way through to the final master using cheap, low budget gear, all recorded within non-studio spaces, I will leave a link to that video series right here on YouTube above in the card. And until next time, happy mixing.